Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to introduce you to the Power BI environment. We're first going to start off by walking you through the Power BI high-level architecture. All right, so as you'll notice on the diagram, cutting right down the middle of it is a dotted line, and that is meant to separate two key areas of our services. So below the dotted line is what we're going to consider on-premise. So those are things that are installed within your wall. So for example, installed on a desktop or a server room, maybe in your organization. Those things are considered on-premise. Above the dotted line, we're considering to be cloud. Okay, so that's our first thing. So what we're going to do here inside of the Power BI desktop in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen is we first want to work on connecting into data sources and ingesting them into the Power BI desktop. We're then going to bring that data in, go through some transformations, and get it into a report-ready state. We're going to dive into more details on that whole process, but let's just consider those first two arrows there, getting data into the desktop and getting it into a report-ready state, and finally building some reports that we can use for consumption. Once that's complete, we want to go through a publish process. So we're going to take our work that we've done on the Power BI desktop and publish it into the Power BI service that resides in the cloud. At this point in time, the work that you've published will be available through a mobile device, and almost instantaneously, it will be available to you in Power BI Mobile. And if you have access to the Power BI Mobile app on your preferred mobile device, then you can access your content through there as well. Okay, so then next what ends up happening here from a high-level architecture, and we're not actually going to do this piece in this particular class because it's beyond the scope of it, is the setting up of a gateway. So the reason that we need to set that gateway up is we somehow need a way to get our refresh data on a daily basis or whatever your schedule happens to be from our sources on-premise up into the cloud. So the gateway is essentially going to be that transportation highway that allows the Power BI service to connect back down into your on-premise data sources and bring the new data into the service on your scheduled refresh basis. If you have data in the cloud, you actually don't need the data gateway. You can actually just connect directly into those cloud-based sources. So that's a really nice piece of your data residing in the cloud. And just for completeness of the diagram, we have that piece of infrastructure in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen there, the Power BI report service. So if you actually want to do Power BI work and build things out but never publish it in the cloud and take advantage of some of the features in Power BI, you can utilize the Power BI report server. We're not going to cover that in this class. It's beyond the scope of this. And yeah, so I just want to make sure that you have a complete picture of the Power BI high-level architecture, because you may run into artifacts online as you're learning more about Power BI that refer to the Power BI report server. It's important just to understand where it fits. But we're going to be doing all of our work exclusively in this class with the Power BI desktop and the Power BI service, and then touching on the Power BI mobile as well. All right, so let's just talk about the Power BI end-to-end process flow here. So back in one of the previous sub-lessons, we talked about the data analytics lifecycle and how we go from a business question to ultimately satisfying the answer to that question. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take advantage of the Power BI desktop. So we're going to get that installed on your machine so that you can go ahead and do some of the processes below here. So in the Power BI desktop, we will work with the Power Query editor. We're going to do some data modeling. We're going to end up building some reporting. And ultimately, when we're done those high-level processes, we're going to take our work and publish it into the Power BI service and put our work into a workspace in that service. So that's a very high-level process flow. Diving into a little bit more detail here, as we talked about in the previous sub-lesson, we first need to go in and find our data sources. So we're going to make a connection to a data source once we find the source that's going to answer our business question. And then we're going to go ahead and extract that data from that data source. Once we bring it into the Power Query editor from an extract perspective, we're going to go through a transformation step. So that's that little T right above the query editor. And we're going to go through and transform data. We're going to go ahead and introduce you to the M language that is inside of the Power Query editor. Although largely a lot of the transformations that you will be performing, you can do through wizards and configuration screens. So there's really no need at this point to dive into the language, but we introduce it to you just so you're aware of its existence in Power BI and where it fits. Once we go through that step of transforming our data and getting it ready for reporting, we will then load that data over into the data model. Once our data is loaded into the data model, and we have data that is almost ready for reporting, we're going to go through a process of adding extra value to that data model. We're going to build relationships between our tables. We're going to perhaps add hierarchies to our data model, which we'll do in this course. We will then go through and build some DAX expressions. So for example, we're going to take advantage of building some measures. Once we have our data model ready for reporting, then we're going to go ahead to the report canvas and start doing some visualizations. And take those visualizations and craft stories, and hopefully stories that are compelling, easy to understand, and ultimately are going to satisfy our business questions. And we actually want to make it look nice. So we're going to go through some things around making your analytics look good so that it's visually appealing for your end users. Once we're done all this hard work, and everything to this point here is the bulk of the work inside of Power BI. So in the first two steps there of acquiring data through Power Query Editor and putting in the data model, that typically is about 70 to 80% of the work in any analytics endeavor. Once you have data in a report-ready state, reporting actually isn't as difficult as one might think. For a lot of years, the data acquisition and reporting all got lumped into one process, so there was a lot of talk around how difficult reporting was. But really, if you separate the two, most of the hard work was back in the actual acquisition and cleansing the data. Once you actually got data into report-ready state, reporting typically isn't that difficult. Now, I'm not trying to make it seem simple. It certainly is made easier if you actually have data in a much more cleansed and report-ready state. Once we have built stuff on the report canvas, we will then publish our work into the Power BI service, because that is where people are going to go ahead and consume our data. We will work on sharing our data out. We're going to show you some great security features that are embedded into Power BI so we can better secure our data than we have in other reporting tools. And we're going to just briefly touch on some governance features that are available in Power BI as well. So this, at a very high level, is the Power BI end-to-end process flow that we're going to use that maps back to the previous sub-lesson where we talked about the data analytics process flow, how we're going to connect to sources and ultimately deliver the visualizations and answers to business questions to our business users so they can consume it. And once again, with this, you'll find this is a highly iterative process. This is illustrated as being linear, but there's a lot of back and forth in this process as we discover new things. All right, that brings us to the end of this sublesson.